Thanks. The whole premise of this idea is that I wanted to document the coronavirus and how it's affecting people, and in serious ways, and in some cases, there are even humorous ways. Um, but my first guest, Ed, a good friend, um, I've hoodwinked into doing this, and so the first question I have is, when were you aware of the virus even existing?
I'm still working, so I actually two ways. One was in business because I'm in insurance part of it, so clients were starting to be affected, and then the second is medically because we have my mother-in-law lives with us and is elderly, which needs total care all the time, and the hospital guidelines coming into effect. And then the third is I have a daughter that teaches high school, so we got it three different ways.
Okay, and then I
I can
guess
see this could be a long freaking interview because you just wanted a sentence.
well, it's okay because you kind of put uh, a few things together that were going to be in two questions. But what were your immediate thoughts when you heard about it? Not directly of like your mother-in-law or the fact that you're in the insurance business or that your daughter teaches high school. Is that did you have any overall thoughts like when people knew about AIDS, if they had a friend or something and they had AIDS, it was like 9 months and you're gone. um, and people would have that kind of thought process. And in this case, I don't think anybody really had a much of a clue, and so everybody kind of made up their own mind of what was going to happen. So do you remember kind of if you had any kind of thought of what was this going to mean?
Well, I think initially it was something that was like the E. coli virus or something like that, where it was serious but not would not actually become as much of a political as well as a mandated type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So in
Okay.
the beginning, it was understand getting and understand, but not taking it as serious as we all do now, until we just saw the numbers and saw how everyone was put under guidelines and how businesses closed their offices, how schools closed their offices, that type of thing.
Well, my next question is, how does it affect did it affect you professionally and being in the insurance business, and not necessarily in the health insurance business, but still in the greater category of insurance? Did that have like some immediate impact, or has it been gradual, or am I putting words in your mouth,
Oh
or
no,
what?
from an internal business, it actually has changed business totally. It went from a more hands-on, face-to-face relationship type business to more of a virtual type of respecting your clients and your workforce, so everyone's working at home. With that, there are problems just like anywhere. It's now trying to keep it so that we just, as a business or as a people, don't become so transactional, that we actually
Mm-hmm.
need to learn how to handle and communicate with people virtually.
So where do you get your news about the virus initially and currently? Is it through the three major broadcast networks, or is it through any of the cable stations, like Fox or CNBC or CNN, or is it professional peers, just neighbors, friends, all of the above?
Probably in the beginning, I would say the majority of it was the news, just the frontline news you see on TV,
Mm-hmm.
and that has gone down to minimal, probably 10 to 5%, just due to the way um, the lack of organized um information coming out, the political part of it, the finger pointing. So it becomes more of a harsh, scared piece, as like, and I got a mother-in-law that's 92 and all she does is watch TV. So I mean, she is so scared to death, even though she's in a very safe environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't watch a lot of the news anymore. What I do is do a lot more reading, and then we have contacts that are physicians and that type of piece. And then we're getting information from the actual insurance industry and my friends in the industry in regard to it. And let's face it really comes down to taking personal responsibility
Mm-hmm.
of how to handle this. I mean,
Absolutely.
it is up to me to be able to social distance and stay 6 feet away. It is up to me to wear a mask so that I not only am protecting myself so I can protect my family, but also be respectful for those people that I'm talking to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the disappointing piece of it is for me is the lack of respect and personal responsibility a lot of people are taking in regard to this.
Okay, so to what extent has this affected your personal life? And
Take a hold.
keep this like take two. How has this affected your personal life? And make this very short, like one sentence.
It's positive and negative. Okay, the positive is more time spent at home, more time with the family, that type of thing. More of the caring relationship internally. The negative, of course, is the lack of interaction outside in our core friends and not being able to go to church. Granted, we do it virtually, so that piece of it. But there are certain positive things that have come out of this.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a more caring attitude. That's short enough.
Well, thank you for the truck that just went by.
Yeah,
Please have some coffee. I guess during the quarantine period in the beginning, or even to a certain extent now, what humorous things may have happened? Like, did you find yourself going crazy? Like, what am I going to do at home? Or, gosh, I've got all these things that I normally would like to do, and now I have the time to do them. Or I just want to go, curl up in a ball in my room and not talk to anybody.
No. Actually, there's a few things. I drink a hell of a lot more. I mean, the liquor, I can understand why liquor store stocks up, but the other part is, getting a lot more stuff down the home. And the projects I work on, I'm actually taking more time and finishing the projects the way I've always wanted them to do instead of being on a huge timeline.
Okay, well, my last question, believe it or not, is do you think that we as a nation have any kind of long-term strategy to handle pandemics? Not necessarily this one, but in the future, if this type of situation occurs, do we have a plan, or are we going to kind of wing it? Do you have any kind of feeling? And it really doesn't have anything to do with Donald Trump or the Congress. It's just in general, as a population, maybe we've all will learn something from this, but we need a plan. We can't just all be winging it, I think.
I guess that's a disappointment area. I mean, granted, everyone is trying to find solutions, but I really don't. I'm hoping that we've learned from this, but from this, I've certainly seen that we've got disconnects between federal, state, local communities. Have we learned from that? I certainly hope so. I haven't seen it yet, but no, I don't think we're armed. I don't think we really are armed for the next pandemic based on what I'm seeing here.
Okay, well then, this is the very last thing. Is I hope you found this somewhat interesting and humorous, and you already got your gift package, and I expect you to be wearing your Dharma T-shirt.
Absolutely.
You'll probably cut the sleeves off, but I thank you, Ed. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no worries.
Okay. From Dharma, this is Dudley somewhere signing off. Okay. Well, today we're talking to Meg, a recent college graduate and a colleague of mine, And we're going to go through the same questions we've done with our previous interviewees. Again, we're doing this in Dharma, 1968 Volkswagen bus. It's exactly 6 feet from where Meg's sitting to where I'm sitting in the driver's seat. So my first question is, do you remember when you first heard about the virus?
I do. I remember hearing about it on the news. I live with my parents, so my parents were watching the news one day, and something about coronavirus, whatever this mysterious virus was, that was still only in the East, hadn't come to America yet. This was sometime in January. I didn't really think much of it. Wasn't really worried about it. Just it was this passing thing in my mind.
So what do you know about the virus? Not when it came or how it came, but the ramifications of the virus itself. How does it find itself?
I think I kind of have a good understanding of it. It's sometimes hard to get a good grasp of what is true, what isn't true about it. I know that it's mostly a respiratory virus and that it, attacks your lungs, and you have flu and cold-like symptoms, and it can impact people in different ways, and it's really been huge in my life in terms of school and work and how it's impacted those areas of my life.
Okay, so let's go into how it's impacted you personally, because you went through 3 years at least of a very traditional college education at a pretty darn good school, and then all of a sudden, what happened?
Right, so I was in the second semester of my senior year, really excited, happy to just take everything in for the last time and just enjoy myself, enjoy my classes. I was really enjoying my classes. I was looking forward to going to school every day, and then I went on spring break at the beginning of March, came back to school, I think for 1, maybe 2 days, and then all of a sudden the whole university, the whole student body got an email saying classes are going online effective immediately. And there was really no transition period. There was no discussion of how they were going to handle it. It was just one day we were in class and the next day we weren't, and that was it. I know some schools talked about maybe going back into in-person classes for a short period after being online. Kind of worked itself out in hopes that the virus would be done with quickly. Obviously it wasn't, but Loyola said no, we're never going back to in-person classes for the spring semester of 2020. So it was shattered right there, and then graduation got canceled and everything else. So
Was there any kind of a virtual graduation?
we just had our virtual graduation this past Saturday. So all the way in August. We were supposed to graduate in May. They said that they were gonna push back the graduation until August, hoping that we could have an in-person thing, and then it ended up just being virtual. So we finally did a celebration, but it's no way the same as doing it in person.
So in terms of getting news now about the virus, do you rely on the 3 major television networks, the cable networks like Fox or CNN, MNSB, I keep screwing that MNBC, local newspapers, friends, family, all of the above? Can you kind of relay how you get your daily news?
Yeah. I would say most of it is word of mouth, just by talking to people, talking to my family, my friends, coworkers, whoever I'm interacting with. At the beginning of the virus, when everybody was kind of like in a panic, I sought out information online through like the Washington Post, New York Times, like newspapers rather than TV outlets, news outlets. And then maybe come around May, I just gave up and was like, I don't really want to know. There's no point because it just keeps getting higher and higher and higher, and it was just stressing me out. So I kind of just stopped getting news.
So, in terms of your everyday life now, the restrictions that have been put in place, either by the state government or the local government or by your employer, can you just sort of talk about what you have to go through on a daily basis that certainly 7 months ago you didn't?
Right. So I have to wear a mask every day when I work. Sometimes it's up for 8 or 9 hours at a time. I can't take it off unless I, go into the break room, whatever. Which was a big adjustment at first. When I first had to do it, I would get headaches and feel like I wouldn't be able to breathe and just like have to go outside and take the mask off discreetly so that I could breathe. Now I'm used to it, but it's really weird. And even looking back and like watching programs on TV where there's like huge crowds gathered and stuff, it gives me anxiety. And it's like I've noticed that I'm like, oh, crowds, like they shouldn't be together. And then I remember, I'm like, no, that's before all this happened. That's okay. And I think it's gonna be really hard and weird for me to be in crowds again and not feel uncomfortable and not feel like I shouldn't be there or everybody shouldn't be there together. So.
Okay, well, we have a very serious topic, but have you find any humor at all in what you've gone through?
Yeah, I think I have. I mean, on the bright side, I'm an introvert and I like being alone, so being kind of shut in my house has been peaceful. So, I mean, there's a bright side, and I know that everything happens for a reason, and I'm learning from this experience, so, it is what it is. We learn stuff and we move on and we get better.
Now, do you think that our government, and I'm not talking about the immediate administration or anything, but our government in total has or is moving towards any plan to affect pandemics? Because as the world expands and we all interact more, we're going to have more opportunities of having environmental situations that we don't really have any built-in immunities for.
Right.
So what's your take on that, or what would be your suggestions?
I really do hope that this whole thing teaches people and our government more about health and safety and just the necessity it is to keep your hands clean, to like not transfer diseases to each other. And we always think that in America we're so safe from everything, and we have this like great infrastructure, we have this great government policy that's going to protect us from disease and war and whatever, and that's not the case. Like, it can come here, and it's showed how unprepared we are. So I don't know what the government's doing. I haven't really kept up on that, but I do hope that this is a turning point, and that stuff, regulations, policies, whatever changes need to be made are going to start being made to protect the global society that
Well, Meg, I'd like to thank you. You're our fourth interviewee in Dharma's Cafe, and I really appreciate your time and your
Thank you
comments.
for having me.
Well, today, now we have an interview with Meryl, and Meryl was nice enough to render the Dharma Cafe logo, so I really appreciate that.
Of course.
And also I appreciate the fact that I'm now getting the input of somebody that's younger than I am. So, Meryl, when do you, or if you can harken back, when do you remember first hearing about the virus?
Remember first hearing it? Well, I was definitely here when I heard about it. It was probably like back in December when it was starting to show up. And I didn't really think much of it. I just thought it was like just a normal flu, but as time went by, obviously we got a lot more worse than that. Yeah.
Okay, so how has it really affected your life? I mean, I'm not that familiar with whether you just got out of college and didn't have a college graduation, or...
Well, thankfully, I graduated before any of this happened. The only thing that affected me was the fact that my mom works in the hospital, so she had to be part of the people that was one of the first responders. But she works in the cancer department. So what her hospital did was they made her wing as more of like the sanctuary, I guess, so that when patients didn't have the virus, they would put them there as this, as a safe haven, whereas the ones that were actually affected with the virus is being in a different place. But thankfully she wasn't near any of the people that were affected, but just the fact that there were people in her hospital that had the virus did scare me a little bit.
So how did she bring that, the dynamics home? In other words, as far as social distancing, as far as hygiene, did she kind of fire that up a little bit more than she might normally?
Definitely. When she was coming home, she didn't want to go into the house until she was completely changed. She didn't want any of her uniform to go into the house at all. She would make sure that everything was bagged up and cleaned up separately from any of our clothes. So, and then of course she bought a bunch of hand sanitizer, a bunch of gloves, the masks, obviously. But no, she was completely careful when it came to her coming home before she, touched anything.
So how has the virus affected your life now? Professionally you're a graphic designer, but how has it affected you otherwise?
Definitely the fact that I can't hang out with my friends as much as I could. A lot of my friends, they like to hang out, they like to go out and eat and hang and all that stuff. I'm definitely a hugger. I love hugging people, but obviously I can't do that anymore. And I don't know, like the fact that wearing a mask didn't really bother me as much. I guess in my sort of way, it was kind of like another way of fashion in a sense. So being able to express at least some sort of art on your face, even though you can't really see half of your face, I thought it was a good idea. I just, of course you can't really breathe, but I try to look at a positive side of things and, think that, hey, this is another sort of way to express yourself. If you want to decorate your mask, go for it.
Now, do you think that the government, and I'm not specifically looking at our current president or anything, but our government in general has any kind of plan, long-range plan for any future pandemics, as all the countries of the world are interacting more and more. Everyone's going to be exposed to environments they've never been exposed to before.
Right.
So do you think that that a plan is developed or being developed?
At this point, I don't know what's happening because half of the world is listening, the other half isn't. I just feel like, if everybody was just on the same boat, we can at least get over this quicker. But at this point, I don't know what's happening anymore.
All right, so it's a very serious topic, but have you found anything humorous about it?
Anything humorous? Oh, definitely finding out how much this pandemic brings out of the bad side of people. Like, you wouldn't think that some people would act how they would until something drastic has happened, and you're just like, what happened? Like, I know some of it is, I guess, yeah, it is laugh worthy, but at the same time, it's like you wouldn't have thought that some people would think differently now. But yeah, it's definitely a crazy world now.
So if you if you were the queen of the world, and of course you are, um, what kind of advice would you give the world in terms of dealing with this pandemic, and not just necessarily in terms of sanitation, but in terms of the mental aspect of it, and I do emphasize a lot of the humor because on every time you have a black side, you have a white side. So can you speak to that?
Well, I mean, all you can do now is just keep your head up high, think about the future and what you can and can't do. Just focus on what you can do. You know, use your head. Definitely use your head. And yeah, just stay safe and just be wary of what's all around you, and just make sure that you're keeping everybody safe along with yourself. So.
Well, Meryl, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. I definitely appreciate you being able to render my chaotic ideas into a three-dimensional object. So stay healthy, and I think there's more designs to render in the future.
Of course.
Okay, I'd like to welcome Dave. I've known Dave for a long time, professionally, personally. Somehow we've remained friends. I think it has to do with cars. But at any rate, welcome to our third of the virus interviews in Dharma's Cafe. And I guess the first question I have for Dave is, when did you first learn about the virus?
That was probably early to mid-February. I like to watch news. I'm a news maven. And between CNN, New York Times, I started hearing stories about the virus in Wuhan, China. And many, many years ago, I read a book by Tom Clancy about how terrorists might actually use the transportation systems as a way to spreading the virus, and recognizing how China's been integrated into transportation hubs, airlines, products, retailing. Good example, I'm in retailing, and many of our products come from China. That was really intriguing to see and follow the news story. Even to this day, I still recall the story of China trying to build a hospital in 10 days. So probably mid-February is when I really caught it, and I followed the story since.
Okay, now on a personal level, how is actually on a professional and personal level, how has it affected you in terms of everyday actions, past actions, future actions?
On a professional level, being in retailing, it's been kind of devastating for retailers. If you think about middle of March, when it was really first found here in the United States, that many states went into the shelter-in-place rules and regulations, that state by state, retailing started to shut down. So by middle of March, we were actually working from home, and then by end of March, the vast majority of people in my company, the company headquarters, were put on furlough. So the furlough actually began on April 4th. Now we're sitting on August 10th, and frankly, we're still on furlough, and there's no end in sight of that. Retailing may not recover from it. There'll be a few like Amazon, Home Depot, Lowe's, who have a very specific need, but most retailers right now are struggling, and you see all the bankruptcies from that. In all honesty, I doubt that we'll go back, because it probably will not be the same for a very, very long time. So it's had a dramatic impact on my professional life. From a personal life, it's been similar in that my family, my friends, many of them are back east in New Jersey, and I would typically fly back and see them, a couple times a year. Matter of fact, we actually had a vacation planned in Florida in mid-May, and all of that's been scrapped. So my family, my sisters, my brothers, my relatives, who I typically see many times a year, I've not seen. Then my friends here, we would typically get together for birthday parties and euchre games. That's far and few in between, and many of those have been just drive-by visits. So it's really been a struggle personally because I live by myself and I would have friends who help with that aspect of my life, and we've not really been able to do that.
Okay, is there any other place that you've found yourself getting news sources other than the three major networks and the cable networks like CNN or Fox or MSNBC? I always screw that up.
I typically like
Or newspapers. You mentioned the New York Times. Anything else?
I
That you can
typically
think of?
like to get my information from sources that are more vetted. Right now, when you go out there, if you go out to YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, much of what's out there is opinion, and opinions these days is very skewed based on political perspective. And I do know a lot of the media also has a slant, but usually the sources are vetted more than once. And if you go to enough of those, you can confirm and feel better that you're getting good information. But for the most part, it's going to be major networks, major newspapers, major websites is where I'll get my information.
So, I mean, I know that from what you've explained on retail, that time out, we have a phone call with our star.
Unknown.
Okay.
Someone's telling me
It's an unknown. Somebody's trying to get him back into retail, I think. But maybe that ties into this is, do you see, in general terms, any light at the end of the tunnel?
You almost have to, right? The thing that if you go back to March, I'm sure for all of us, the sheer fear of what was happening around us created people buying up all the toilet paper, right? So what's happened now is people have kind of settled into routines that allow them to try to live around the virus. So first off, from where we were in March to where we are today, there's a different sense. Like I still remember going to the food store my first time the virus, and I virtually ran to the food store to get in and get out as quickly as possible because I didn't want to have any possibility of being in there more than 10 minutes. So I think the good news is people are learning to adjust. I do think eventually there'll be treatments and there'll be a vaccine. The hard part is everything's become politicized. Whether it's wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, taking the vaccine, not taking the vaccine, social distancing, not social distancing. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's how far that light is. If everyone cooperated and worked together, that's probably closer. If not, there's still light, but it'll be further away. Because, will people take the vaccine when it becomes available? Will people take treatments when it becomes available? And will they make it into a political statement? But yeah, I do see there's light. I think people always adjust. And you go back to 1918, 1919, that was followed by the Roaring 20s, right? So I think things will shake out, but it's how we get there that'll be the issue.
Okay, do you see any humor in the situation we're in? I mean, we all know how serious it is, but I've always found that in a situation where it's very, very serious and very, very dark, that somehow you can find some light, you can find some humor in it. Even if it's, you mentioned the toilet paper, that just watching people, running like crazy just to get that last roll of toilet paper.
I think there's always humor in everything. It doesn't matter what it is, you can find something funny in it. So the answer is yes. And I think toilet paper is a great example, right? But I think it's more irony. Like you think about what you did in January and what you do today, what you'll do next, 6 months from now. I think there's more irony in how it runs than humor, but absolutely there's humor in everything. It does, and if you look on YouTube, you'll find all kinds of stories. There's videos on what it's like to be, sequestered with your family and trying to stay in health, good health during it. So yes, I think there's a lot of humor still out there, and you can poke fun at it, and there's also a lot of irony.
I think that's what we're doing right now is all designed for, is a little sense of humor. Is everybody, all the people that will be interviewed or have been interviewed, all have very individual takes, all have very individual backgrounds, but we all share at least two things in common. A, we're living during this particular time in history, and B, we're sitting in a 1968 Volkswagen bus, and we just happen to be 6 feet apart. Do you think that, in general terms, in policy, that something's being created to handle future pandemics? Because with the integration of of all of the major industrial countries and emerging industrial countries, we're all going to be integrated so much. So these types of situations or opportunities will avail themselves.
That's a loaded question.
I try to.
I would like to say the answer is yes, but I can't say there's evidence today that shows that. If anything, there's a retreat for us as a country from being integrated into the world. So whether it's trade policy, whether it's tariffs, whether it's there's a growing separation, and that can easily be fixed at any given time. It's your desire and your willpower. So I think it will happen, but there's not a lot of evidence today that shows it will.
Well, Dave, I thank you for coming to one of our
Dharma's
Dharma
Bus.
chats. That's right, we're in Dharma's Bus, and I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate the friendship. So
Yeah, I appreciate the friendship as well, Bill.
take care. Okay, today we're venturing into the younger world. Here at the Virus Chats and Dharma's Cafe, we have Adnan, who's been nice enough to render several of my designs, one of which has taken the designs of another young illustrator and along with his own, and we'll show a little close-up of that shirt. And it's a vote early promotion, and Adnan did the top, which is the art of a fictional president, vice presidential candidate, and the bus. And at the bottom is actually a history of Joe Argot's, who's the president's, how he started off at Berkeley and how he ended up at the White House. So with that being said, we'll get on with our interview. And the first question is always, do you have any recollection of when you learned about the virus?
I can't say there's a single moment that I remember, but probably February of this year, of 2020, is when I first heard about it in the news. And, it just started as just like a small news item of, someone has contracted this new virus and people are traveling from Wuhan who have that virus. And I thought it would just be something that was in the news for a week, and then it ended up being all day, every day, just progressively took over everything in the news.
And then what about the effects of the virus? When did you learn of, or what do you know about the effects of the virus? How does it affect humans?
Oh, in terms of symptoms? Well, I know that it's mainly a respiratory, a respiratory virus. If I'm being honest, I couldn't tell you everything about it. I know that the symptoms are like, high fever, just difficulty breathing, a lot of the same symptoms you'd have with a cold, just more severe, and potentially deadly if you're already compromised, immunocompromised.
Okay, so now we'll go into more of your personal, professional life. How has this affected you professionally? I mean, were you able to have a real graduation, or did you have to go online, or just metaphysically think, oh yeah, I just graduated?
Yeah, well, I had already graduated by the time the virus hit, but I definitely know lots of friends who were upset. Some of whom were first person in their family to go to college, and they weren't able to have a real graduation. So I know that was a big problem for a lot of people. For me personally, it's my boss told me I think around the end of March that we would be furloughed essentially. So our hours were pretty much cut down to zero. So we were technically still employed, but with no hours. So she told us, hey, start filing for unemployment, and you won't be here in the store for a while. And then for a good maybe 2 months I was at home, and that had just all sorts of mundane effects on my life, like just sleep schedule completely changed because I was at home all the time. I started playing a lot more video games, definitely started gaining some weight. The typical stuff you hear from most people, but the not having the job was definitely a pretty big effect. But and then eventually she had us starting working remotely, and now we're back. So I'm glad that that I'm fortunate. I know there's a lot of people who are less fortunate.
Well, as the world has sort of changed, as we're all kind of linked by wearing masks and such.
Mm-hmm.
Do you look into your crystal ball and see if you could think of how the immediate future might pan out?
I mean, yeah, this has gone on for a lot longer than I would have anticipated. So, I mean, I frankly don't know. Even if there is a vaccine, that would. I mean, it's a small but vocal minority who's opposed to vaccines. I mean, there's no way to force people to take it. Like, even when there is a vaccine, I don't know that everything's just going to revert to normal. I can see us wearing masks definitely well into 2021, maybe halfway through the next year, maybe longer, who knows. And yeah, I mean, in terms of, I definitely think a lot more businesses are going to be gearing themselves towards online business versus, a brick and mortar, in-person kind of transactions. And yeah, I mean, I definitely see the effects of the virus lasting for, I mean, some of them permanently and some of them for a much longer time than we had initially anticipated, probably for at least another year or so.
Okay, now it's a very serious occurrence,
Sure.
but have you been able to glam any kind of humorous aspects out of this?
That's a good question. I feel like I definitely have, but nothing's coming to mind at the moment.
The fact that you see, every person that comes into your studio is wearing a mask of some sort, or you're selling masks of some sort, or
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we as a t-shirt shop are now making, like a pretty huge percentage of our sales through masks instead of t-shirts. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely, it is kind of funny. I've seen how like a lot of businesses are cashing in on the virus, I guess. The like custom masks and shirt, and even at our store, shirts that are just about the virus. Everybody and their mother wants some kind of pun about coronavirus or quarantine or Zoom school or something. So yeah, it definitely has beyond just beyond being a pandemic that has a physical effect on people. It has a cultural effect, sort of. Yeah, that's definitely one thing that comes to mind.
Okay, so being a member of the certainly not my generation, but much younger generation, do you see the government, and by government I don't mean just, I'm not trying to pick on Donald Trump, but do you see any kind of infrastructure that would be able to handle pandemics in the future? Because let's face it, the America has, and the Western industrialized world interacts so much more with the emerging industrial and even not quite industrial areas of the world. So we're interacting with people that we have absolutely no immunity to at all,
Yeah.
and vice versa. And so, do you have any thoughts on that?
Let's see.
You can think.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I think our government has put some admirable measures in place in terms of, monitoring, or I mean, some states better than others, most definitely, but monitoring the cases and kind of enacting new policies to respond to, upticks or, upticks or falls in the number of cases, decreases in the number of cases. But besides that, I mean, honestly, I can't say that we would be ready if this took if coronavirus just went away completely and then something similar happened in 10 years. I don't think that we've established any kind of really proactive response. I think they are kind of just winging it. I can't say that I'm super confident in their ability to respond to pandemics going forward necessarily.
So where have you primarily got your news on the virus? Has it been like the three major broadcast networks, or has it been cables like, Fox or CNN or MSNBC, local newspapers, New York Times, whatever?
Yeah, more so like you were saying, just the big news networks. At home, I think I'm usually. I don't watch the news. My parents do, and I'll walk by while they are. But yeah, usually it would be ABC. Yeah, sometimes Fox, but yeah, mostly ABC, I think. And besides that, a lot of social media actually. On Facebook, there's oftentimes people sharing statistics and just the kind of I guess the political views of my friend circles are more so the kind of I'm seeing more posts about being careful, being wary, making sure that you're wearing a mask, that you're being conscientious of the people around you, and kind of berating all the people who are refuse to comply with the rules that businesses have put in place. So yeah, a lot of news I've definitely seen in social media actually.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. This little bit of documentation of a little thing in history. Like, to my generation, this is like going to the moon,
Yeah.
because you will look back at this when you're 50 and hopefully go, God, you remember when the virus hit and it took 2 years to get a vaccine, but everything ended up okay.
Right.
Hopefully that will be the scenario.
I certainly hope so.
So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Patty, for entertaining my strange little project here of the virus talks in Dharma's Cafe. And we have a few questions for you to answer. And the first one would be, when did you, if you can remember, when you heard about the coronavirus?
Probably late January or February. It was more in medical journals because I'm in the medical field. I'm a pharmacist, and we heard about what was going on in Wuhan and the things that were happening. It had not come to the U.S., but it was just something that was like a buzz in a lot of journals and publications. So I'd have to say late January, early February.
And so what, as long as you're in the medical profession, what do you know about it? What bad things, good things, neutral things are associated with it?
Yeah, sorry. The things that you know about it change every day because it's a total learning process. No one really knew from the beginning. We went from where it was on objects and you had to wipe down your groceries to now they don't think it's that contractable and it's more through air. Coronavirus typically is the cause of the common cold, so the virus strain is a mutation or a zoonotic mutation, meaning it came from an animal. It was a human virus that mutated in an animal, came back to humans. So every day is like every month, every week is a learning curve. So as things progress, we just change the way we do things and adapt and try to do the best to quell the outbreaks.
So you weren't in quarantine for 14 days, were you? Like a lot of other people, you didn't stay home, did you?
Well, no, I'm an essential worker, so I went to work. So
Right.
it was a lot of unknown in the beginning. So
Mhm.
up and down, like, is this real? Is it not? Anxiety levels. Quite frankly, whenever there'd be a press release of some sort, whether it be state related, the state of Illinois, or federal, you'd see a change in human behavior, and then I would see a change in also just the way people reacted either to what they were doing, like being at the store, or the way they spoke to others. So, kind of like every day is a new day.
So did your daughters have to stay at home? Did she not, or?
Everyone's response to the pandemic is different. Because I kept going to work and my routine didn't change, I didn't feel such a dramatic impact. But other people who had to suddenly work from home, like my husband. So my daughter was kind of vacillating on how should she react, and she became very serious about it. Unusual for someone who's 17, but she was determined to quarantine herself, to stop the spread of the virus, to have a summer, to make sure she could go back to school. So honestly, I was really proud of her for being very socially responsible. So the first 30 to 60 days when the quarantine happened in Illinois, which was in March, she didn't go anywhere or talk to anyone.
Now, other than the medical journals, where else did you get any information? I mean, it might be somewhat casual, but was it through like the three major networks or cable like Fox or MSNBC, CNN, your next door neighbor, whatever?
No. On Apple News, I would look at like New York Times, Washington Post for just like political policy information, because that is a big driver on how things are going. Medical information, straight from the CDC or medical websites only. I use a site called Up to Date. Also, just use the university library at Midwestern University. So I picked, I would look up journal articles or things that were specifically scientific for my scientific portion, but policy issues I would have to go to mostly. What did I look at? PBS is my go-to for information. I feel like it's really unbiased.
So, all that being said, do you feel that the government has developed, and I mean the greater sense of the government, not necessarily the president or his immediate cabinet, but is there a plan, or at least the development of a plan to handle pandemics? Because with the opening of the world, I would think that, and I hate to put words in your mouth, but I would think that the opportunity for these things to happen will be higher. It's just because countries aren't segregated to just their native populations.
Well, policy is probably our biggest hindrance right now. Number one, we don't have a national policy across the United States. It's all local governments or municipalities, and everyone makes their own rules. Hence the reason we keep vacillating between like no outbreaks. Illinois has been one of the more restrictive states, but down south they opened up, and they're as you would expect, virus to resurge. Also, I'm not that well versed to what's going on in Europe, but originally I had planned many vacations overseas. They were canceled. I planned another one, but they won't let Americans in because we won't let Europeans in, and I'm not that well versed on policy, but I kind of feel like it's just been, I don't know, kind of like patchwork, like band-aiding things, not really like taking an approach like the whole U.S. has to put on masks, shut down this, shut down that. If we all did it for 6 or 8 weeks, and then maybe we could like get it under control. So the problem is it just keeps popping up in all these places. So that to me is the biggest problem, is there's not like a universal blanket protocol.
So my normal question would be, do you see light at the end of the tunnel? But it sounds like the tunnel is very long.
The tunnel is long, but I do see light. I mean, it's just going to take its course, just like anything else. And all you can do is do the right thing. I just recently went to Colorado, Breckenridge, and honestly, everybody that went there was not from Colorado. The majority of people were vacationing in the summer, and they had masks required in stores and masks required in any place you just couldn't social distance more than 6 feet, which meant the outside as well. And almost everyone complied. And I heard one gentleman, as we were hiking on a footpath, he was talking to his son who had pulled down his mask, and he said, "Put your mask on," because he was passing me. He's like, "Oh," and he just kind of sighed. And the father said, "Do the right thing." And I honestly think that really encompasses everything we need to do. Do the right thing. Like, do the right thing if everyone does the right thing for a certain period of time, it'll all be fine.
So, did you find, this is very serious, but have you found any humorous moments in this pandemic?
I have. And it's terrible to say, but like, I found the hoarding kind of like funny, because people would hoard like the world is coming to an end, and I'm just, I remember someone asking me like, "There's no more toilet paper." I'm like, "We have Kleenex." "I can't use that." I'm like, "Why?" So, I mean, really, if it comes down to where you essentially had to survive, I mean, we have more than enough. So I found some of the panic from people who didn't have to quarantine, because some people do have to quarantine, and I understand, like, they want to get everything together, they don't want to leave their house. But I found some of that kind of like the modernization of our society, and I just couldn't survive without my Starbucks. Kind of funny.
So, can you think of, other than the questions I've just asked, can you think of, is there anything else that you want to make a statement about?
I guess mostly that this is a very trying time for us as a society, as a human, and you have a choice. to decide how you want to react to it. I am disappointed in the people who have like spewed hate or conspiracy theories rather than kindness and just, hey, let's all just get together and just get through this and like go on with our lives, and doing it not just for me but for everyone. People who have that attitude, it's not just about me, seem to be handling the pandemic better. The people who are more inward focused, you're violating my rights, or I don't know what I feel for some of the people who have to quarantine from their health conditions that are isolated. I worry about them as well. I mostly worry about the financial and social impact that this is going to have on the country more than anything else.
So do you like being interviewed in a 1968 Volkswagen bus?
Well, I love Volkswagens and I love the boss, so that would be a yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate this. Okay, today we're interviewing Gene, and Gene and I worked, it got to be like 30 years ago. I think he'd just gotten out of U of I, and we had space across from each other at Spiegel.
Yeah.
And I think Gene went on to bigger and better things, and then I went on to be an art director there, and then on to Sears. So I think he probably got the better end of the deal. At any rate, again, thank you very much for doing the interview.
No problem.
The first question I always ask is, about when were you aware that this even existed?
I think I was aware of it, probably I was hearing things about it back in December.
Okay.
And then I became, but it was just, murmurings. Like it wasn't really a big deal. And I really started hearing about it in January. And it was interesting because I started getting sick in January. And I was just kind of like brushing it off. Like, oh, whatever. But people weren't really taking it seriously, especially in January, and I didn't either. And my wife was the one who was like, I think you should go to the doctor. And I said, nah. If I go to the doctor, they're just gonna say, you just got a cold, just tough it out. And so she kind of insisted, and I was like, I'm not gonna do it. So a few weeks go by, and I remember I was at the car wash, and I got up in the morning and I went to the car wash, and I'm standing there waiting for them to wash my car, and I remember feeling like, oh wow, it's hard for me to breathe. Like I can't breathe. So then I called my wife and I said, maybe we should go to the hospital because I'm having trouble breathing and I just want to make sure it's not pneumonia. And so she was like, all right. And so we went to the urgent care up the street, and they did x-rays and whatnot, and the woman comes back and is like, guess what? You have pneumonia. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So that kind of started everything off. For me, it was like late January, early February when I started getting sick. And then from February on, I developed the symptoms for COVID. So yeah, and then I had it for a long time, but I'll stop rambling if you have any more questions that you want.
I do. Because I know that you were going to go in for exploratory surgery, and just before that happened, they determined that you actually had the virus, and everything changed.
Yeah, everything changed. And so what actually happened was, to go back, in February and early February, when I thought that we had it, that I had it, I kept going into the doctor for pneumonia. Trisha, my wife, kept saying to the doctors, are you sure he doesn't have COVID? Like, shouldn't we be testing for COVID? And they were like, nah, it's pneumonia. But I had all of these horrible symptoms, and all the COVID symptoms, like fever, body aches, night sweats, cough, difficulty breathing. I would walk just down to the end of the hall and just be wasted. I couldn't, and then walking down the stairs and up the stairs would wipe me out for almost half the day. So my wife was kind of insistent, like with the doctors, like, you know, are you sure he doesn't have COVID? And they were like, nah, we're not. And she's like, well, don't you think we should test him? No, he's fine. It's just the pneumonia. So, you know, I'm in the bed, you know, recuperating from what we think is pneumonia for months. And then they're looking at my chest and stuff, and they're saying, like, okay, well, I had to go back in for x-rays, and they're saying the pneumonia didn't go anywhere. So you need to get another x-ray. And so, well, so we got the x-ray, and they came back and said, you know, it didn't go anywhere. You have to have exploratory surgery to see what's going on. And then when they tested me, because they have to test you for COVID before you go into the hospital or anything like that. So they tested me, and I tested positive for COVID. But by then, I had been suffering from the COVID symptoms for like 3 months. My aunt is a nurse practitioner, and so I had been communicating with her the whole time, and she was saying the same thing my wife was saying, like, I think you have COVID. I think this is COVID, and I think you've had it for a long time. And so, fast forward, the hospital says, now I've tested positive for COVID, I need to sequester myself for 14 days. The pulmonologist had told me before any of this happened, she said, you know, back in January and February, she said, you know, you have pneumonia, you need to stay home. I don't want to bring you into the hospital because there's too much COVID running around. And if you get COVID on top of what you have, that's probably going to be a death sentence. So you need to stay away. So when they told me at this point that I had COVID, I was thinking like, oh, like this is bad. Like this is not good. I'm not sure if I'm going to survive this. Again, I had, you know, all of these symptoms. I had lost like 20 pounds. Was really weak. And so I was really worried. And so my aunt called me, like I said, who was a nurse practitioner, and she said, you know what? I think you had COVID already. I think you've been suffering from COVID for 3 months. I think you're at the end of it, and I think that that's what this is picking up, that this test is picking up the end of it. And so I don't think that you're going to suffer any longer. I think that, you know, this 2 weeks is going to be a breeze. And I was like, I hope you're right. Ended up she was right. The 2 weeks that I was sequestered was sort of me coming on the upswing. The only thing that I was suffering from was like being isolated, not being able to get cookies when I wanted to, not being able to get any food that I wanted to.
Well, that's changed.
my wife and my kids, they were great. Like they were really supportive, and like they locked me in a room, but they were the ones like giving me food and bringing me food and feeding me.
But not cookies.
But not cookies. And my wife and my daughter were the worst. Like, you don't need cookies. So I was denied any sort of fun, any sort of joy on top of the COVID. So then that happened, and finally I cleared the 2 weeks. Right, so it was 2 weeks, and then they said, all right, so you need to come back and get tested to see if you can go back for the surgery. So I go in, I get tested on a Friday. My surgery is supposed to be on a Monday. I get tested, I get cleared, and they say, oh, you're negative. And if you've ever had a COVID test, it's not comfortable. Like, it's horrible. It's not horrible, it's just really uncomfortable. So I got tested, then I got tested again, then I got tested again right before the surgery. So they, you know, I'm going into, they're prepping me for surgery, and they're like, all right, so we need to test you, see if you have, I was like, are you going to stick that thing up my nose again? Like, they just tested me yesterday. They're like, yes, we are. We're going to test you again. So then they tested me for that, and that came back negative. So then I go and they start prepping me for surgery. And before I go into surgery, they give me another X-ray, and the surgeon comes back and says, "Good news, we're sending you home. Whatever's in your lungs has diminished greatly, and so we don't have to have surgery because if it was something bad, it would have increased. So since it's decreasing, we're going to send you home and let it run its course." And then I said, "Well, what happened?" And he said, "Well, here's what I think happened. I think you had what's called a superinfection." And when he said superinfection, I was like, "Are you making that up? Like that, saying super, that sounds like a word you just made up. Like, that doesn't sound like a medical term." He's like, "No, it's a real thing. You had a superinfection related to a virus. And what that means is you had COVID on top of what they were thinking was a bacterial lung infection." So superinfection just means a virus with something else, bacterial or fungal or something like that. And he said, "I think that you've had COVID since February, and you've been suffering with it for this long. And now it's
So Auntie is right.
so my aunt was right, Trisha was right, and so when I came home and I told her, yeah, they said that I've been suffering from COVID probably since February. She's like, "I told you."
Sounds like a Larry Bird. I told you so.
Yeah.
Okay. From what you've just said, Gene, I've got one question I always ask, and that is, did you find any humor in this? And I think you already showed us that the odd things that happen are, you got to laugh at them because
Yeah.
you can't be serious because you're like, really?
Yeah.
So how did it, I mean, you got isolated, professionally, were you able to be in contact with folks, just phone or emails, or did you just sort of like have to slide away from
I
everything?
had to slide away from it. Like it was horrible. Like it sapped everything out of me, and so I had to put work on the back burner for months, because I would. And the weird thing about COVID, at least my case of COVID was, and I heard that this is sort of common, is like I would wake up in the morning, and for the first 15 minutes, I would think, "Oh, it's gone. I'm fine." And then I would get up and walk, and then just start coughing, and everything would descend on me, and then I'd have to lay down, and it would wipe me out for 4 hours. I couldn't. If I would take a phone call, and when I did take phone calls, within 5 minutes I would just start coughing, and I couldn't talk. I couldn't breathe, and so my limit was like, if I did talk on the phone, it was 5 minutes, and then I had to like stop because I literally couldn't communicate, and talking on the phone for 5 minutes would wipe me out for 3 hours. Then I'd have to lay down, and I'd literally be knocked out. Like, it wasn't anything. I would have the thought of in my head, like, I just want to stay awake and I be wiped out. I couldn't do anything.
Okay, so there's that's the humor, I guess. Okay, the last question is, and this has nothing to do with our current president or his cabinet, but do you foresee any kind of plan, long-range plan from this country in terms of handling pandemics? Because as we interact more with countries throughout the world commercially that we have never contacted before, they have their own idiosyncrasy diseases, as do we. Do you see any plan of how we're going to handle that?
I hope so. I honestly think that if we're talking about the president, I think the only way that we're going to get through this is we have to change the administration, because I just don't foresee this current administration taking this seriously enough. Because I think that, in my opinion, what they want to do is they want to leapfrog the seriousness of this pandemic so that they can open the economy. Because I think that their focus is in getting back to work, figuring out how they can make money and all of those things, which is fine, which is great, which is what everybody would like. However, there's no way through it. The only way to get to that end where we can open up and have a normal life again is we have to deal with this pandemic. And people need to deal with it head on and take it seriously, because it's not anything that plays by any of the rules that humans think it should play by. Like I know that we believe that if we just are bored enough with it, or whatever, that it'll just go away and we can just start our normal lives. But it's not going to work that way. We need to deal with this head on. We need to be wearing masks. We need to be social distancing. We need to shut everything down long enough that it can pass us, and then we can start. The way that we're going about it is like we don't have a cohesive plan nationwide, and coronavirus does not care about borders. It doesn't care about what you think. It doesn't care that you're bored with it. It really doesn't. You can think that, oh, I've been in the house long enough, like, you know, I really want to go outside and go to a bar or go swimming or whatever. COVID is waiting for you on your porch. Like, it doesn't care. It's been waiting for you, like, with its watch, like, oh, you're coming out now? Okay, I'm here with you, right? So until we start to take it seriously, it's going to be with us. And it can happen because other countries have proven that if you take it seriously and you have a plan and you are consistent with that plan, you can ameliorate a lot of things, and then you can get back to work. But I think that we have this short attention span that's going on in our country that's not dealing with it. Everybody's like, that's enough. I'm tired of it. Like I said, COVID doesn't care if you're tired.
Well, you know what? Here we are in the 68 Volkswagen bus, and I think this has been the most enlightening of the interviews. They've all been great, but to have the comments of somebody that's actually gone through this has been extremely valuable. And Gene, it's good to see you after, God, a million years.
Good to see you too.
And you know, I think we could both complain about Steve Nadecki or something like that.